Hello and welcome to another webinar on the fascinating insights and applications of behavioral economics and consumer psychology. So I hope as many of you as possible are now connecting. Please let me know in the chat window on the right side of the screen on YouTube. In the chat window, if you can hear me and if you can see me properly. Last time I had the opportunity to speak with Oliver from Ludocrafts. We talked about behavioral economics and gamification, where those two overlap, what they have in common, where they can complement themselves. And today I have the great pleasure to welcome Sam Tatam. Sam is the consulting partner, formerly the behavioral strategy director at Ogilvy UK. And I've met Sam, well, already quite some time ago. Well, I think we can say that we've over time become friends with Sam. Sam, welcome, and it's such a pleasure to have you here.
Mitesh, thank you. It's good to connect and really pleased to be with our audience and to talk about shared passions this afternoon. So thank you.
You know, Sam has always been a big inspiration for me. I've learned a lot. I probably never told you, Sam, this, but I very much respect what you do. I love all the projects and the approach that you adopted at Ogilvy, the way you approach projects with your team. And I think we'll have plenty of time to talk about that. So you're saying that everything works fine, so this is a good start. Please let us know where you're connecting from. I see someone from the UK, from Italy. So people from around the world, let us know where you're connecting from.
It's amazing.
And, yes, actually, this is an international community which you attracted to this webinar. So well done, Sam. I was wondering, you know, when I was preparing the webinar, do you remember the first time we met?
I did. We were in Prague.
Yes, absolutely.
We were speaking at events, and I remember we were lucky to enjoy a beautiful pint of Prague's finest afterwards and talk about the ins and outs of behavioral science. So I do recall. I mean, that must have been 3 or 4 years ago, maybe even longer.
At least 3 years ago. I think it was either in 2016 or 17, so really a long time ago. And well, it was one of those smaller, not very memorable conferences that we attended, but I'm so happy I went there because we met and we since collaborated on a couple of things, and we'll talk about those a little bit later on. Sam, last time we spoke, it was on Monday. You were quite drained. Was this a better day? Did we catch you on a lucky day where you were not on calls from the very morning until now?
We do. I managed to make a buffer. No, I think behavioral science never sleeps. I think we're in a really exciting stage. I think within Ogilvy is to the focus of behavioral science and really informing a lot of our work, and that's drawing lots of great interest. So I think for us, it's sort of keeping afloat and how quickly we can help to steer and grow. So it's full times, but certainly a kinder day than Monday. Let's hope it continues.
Yeah, right. Well, probably the tough times are over for you. I mean, the toughest times, because I know you spent the last couple of months in Australia, actually, with what is it, a 9 or 10 hour time difference, and working on projects on the other side of the world must be quite a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, if anyone's ever thinking about that experiment, to work in a London office from Sydney, I'd warn against it. But also it's an amazing signal, and our founder Rory Sutherland talks a lot about this as to sort of how business can be changing, connected by Zoom. In our business now, we call it Zoomlandia, so making hybrid teams from across the world. So it is possible, but it's tough if you're trying to stay awake in the same times.
Right. So before I properly introduce you, please, our dear audience, let us know how familiar are you with behavioral economics? On a scale from 1 to 10, where 10 is Sam Tatam and 1 is basically someone who's never heard of behavioral economics, let us know how familiar are you, how many books you've read, how many hours you've spent studying behavioral economics. And so now the proper introduction of Sam. So as I said, Sam is leading an amazing team of well, experts from various fields, and this will be my next question. So how does your team look like? But Sam is leading an amazing team working on various challenges from safety to consumer behavior at Ogilvy, UK. He works alongside Rory Sutherland, and I know that you've worked for some of the biggest names, the biggest brands out there, ranging from Melinda and well, the Gates Foundation, KFC, and other big names. So Sam, once again, welcome, and please, everybody, follow Sam on LinkedIn and Twitter, and my colleagues will post links to Sam's profiles right into the chat window, so that you can just click on it and follow Sam. I guess he'll be more than happy to discuss any insights or any projects afterwards. Will you, Sam?
Of course, and love it. I can see some familiar names. Uga, Eve, Juben. It's great for you to connect. Thank you. And I'm not sure if anyone can be a 10 out of 10 on this stuff. So I think I'm certainly not there. But lovely to see that we have a sort of a split audience with some deep familiarity and some people sort of new to the category. So hopefully we'll be able to bridge some of that a little bit today.
But Sam, please tell me, so how does your team look like? Who is it composed from? You know, what specialties do you have on the team?
Really good question. So in the UK, we're a team of 15 within a big agency within Ogilvy. So we're still a small unit across the globe. We have around sort of 30 specialist practitioners within Ogilvy. So our team, we see sort of behavioural science as most people see behavioural science as a bit of a sort of an umbrella term, an umbrella category for subfields of psychology, social psychology, cognitive psychology, as well as fields like sort of behavioural economics, anthropology, broader human understanding. So our team, I'd suggest our team has a skew towards the psychology background. We have individuals. I'm an organisational psychologist in my training. And we have another org psych in our team. So when we look at sort of internal organizational change, that sort of supports us in driving that. Individuals with straight behavioral science masters, behavioral economics masters. We have an individual who's a sort of specialized in human geography. So understanding people in place. Again, really important to know, as we always say, context is king, but so too is culture. And an individual who comes from a background in human evolution and biology. And a lot of what I'll talk about this afternoon actually is around our evolved, behavioral science is really our evolved sense. So it helps to have someone that has a deep, sort of a depth of expertise here. When you tend to ask sort of the questions of what we might call within Ogilvy sort of the real why, they tend to land in evolution somewhere, in sexual selection, reproduction, survival. That sort of tends to be a guidance of much of what we feel and experience today.
No, interesting, really interesting, and this must be fascinating to work in this kind of team. Well, we're a much smaller team, and we're mainly psychologists. All of my colleagues are actually psychologists besides me. I don't have any education any formal education in any social science. But before we go on, and I have a couple more questions before I leave the floor to you and your presentation. But before that, let me just briefly tell you what will be the agenda for today. So, and first of all, I'm wondering, I have a question for you guys. So please let me know once again in the chat window, what kind of behavioral insights are you most interested in? Is it business applications? Is it case studies? Is it applications into policy making? Is it applications in some other fields of our lives? So please let me know, what is it that you get the most excited, that you would like to learn more about, because this will then influence the upcoming webinars and all that we do, so that you get the most out of it. So how this will work is that we'll spend another maybe 3-4 minutes talking with Sam, and then he will have his presentation. After the presentation, there will be a Q&A session. If you have questions throughout the presentation, please use this tool. It's called Pigeonhole, and it's a specific tool for asking questions, so that they don't get lost in chat. So just scan the QR code, please, or go to pigeonhole.at and enter the passcode Sam Tatam. And feel free to ask your questions. They will wait there, and then at the end, I will ask them to Sam. So this is it. I'll leave it on the screen for a while. Sam, you said it yourself. You're swamped with work, and so what are you working on? What are some of the projects you can actually disclose that you're currently working on?
And I think swamped in work is a lovely challenge to have. So thriving in opportunities, I think. So really, if I was to put the positive frame. One of the things that I think I certainly consider, and I think I'd like to hope that our broader team considers, we're very fortunate within Ogilvy more generally to work on a diversity of clients and challenges, but I think sort of even more so that can be the case within the behavioral science practice. At the moment, we're working with sort of small local councils, for example, looking at how we can increase recycling in flats. We're working with big global foundations, seeing how we can develop brand fortified food for women of reproductive age, and see how we can embed cues within the product, the packaging, the marketing mix that sort of enables consumption frequency. So to see how we've got a great fortified product, we don't receive a benefit unless we have it maybe 3 times a week. What are some ways in which we can help to drive this? And working in Nigeria, working in Pakistan on 2 separate projects to see how we can fuel those initiatives. Working with a Golden Circle law firm to support their internal organization change, how we can help to drive digital adoption and address some psychological barriers when the tech solutions are there. It's no point having $2 million worth of tech installed if no one's using it. And oftentimes it's the people. It's the people element that matters. Working with a local UK-based food delivery services to see how we can help to boost subscription and reduce churn in particular products and subscription categories. So lots of sort of divergent styles of projects, and what I think for us that's really important. Actually, the plethora of different meetings that we can be in. We can be talking sustainability and recycling programs in the morning, and speaking with the likes of Silicon Valley in the afternoon, helping to launch a product. But actually, what we find is that there are shared elements of the human psyche that we can connect. And really, from a creative perspective, and it's important for me to frame that, because I think our balance within Ogilvy is really this sort of how behavioral science can be taken to the power of creativity, and how we can create new, novel, effective ways of using these insights. And sometimes it's actually exploring in far-off planets. You can actually bring a learning from working with Sainsbury's to the likes of working with Google, because fundamentally they're the same psychological challenge, just in a slightly different context that we can work towards.
I believe this is the beauty of being a consultant in behavioral economics, because you get such a variety of different projects where the common denominator is that you always use the insights from human psychology and the insights on how the subconscious mind works. And it's nearly magic how the same insight can be applied to boost sales and to promote a healthy behavior, for example. Sam, you're working on a book, aren't you?
I am. I'm toiling away in the background.
So what's the topic of the book?
So the topic actually will explore elements of the central premise that this afternoon. I'd love to share that. One of the, and it sort of speaks to the observation I just made, that actually there are patterns of solutions. There are patterns of ideas that sort of already exist around us that we're adapting, creating, trialing, and failing with sort of every day. And what I believe is actually psychology, and I know I'm not alone in this belief, but psychology helps us to join these patterns. It helps us to make sense of some of these outcomes, so we can find success faster. So we can go from, so if we're looking to innovate or find solutions, we can start with sort of everything on the planet, or we can build from a cluster of solutions that might already exist, connected by their underlying psychology. So I'll talk about that. I'd really enjoy to share some thoughts as a start for that, for something that's due to be launched early next year.
So early next year, that was my next question. So when will it be published? Sure. Okay.
Next year, yeah. So it's going into print at the end of the year, as we keep going.
Very much looking forward. So we'll get a taste of what Sam's new book will be about just in a minute. And so before I leave the floor to you, before you jump into your presentation, there's one more thing I would like to announce. And I've been looking at the answers you gave to my question. So what kind of business insights you would be most interested in? And what kept coming up again and again were case studies, business applications, marketing, and consumer behavior. And this was somehow the trend that I've been observing for many years now, that people are so fascinated by behavioral economics and they would love to use it in their own work, in their own business. But there's simply so few resources on how to do it. So if I'm a marketeer and I want to design a direct email to my customers, there's so few case studies, business case studies, I can get inspiration from. And that's why we decided to launch something called InsideBe. And what InsideBe will be is one place on the internet where which will be dedicated to behavioral economics in business, where you will be able to find case studies, resources, step-by-step guides, online courses, ebooks on how to use all these amazing insights in business, in various areas of business, ranging from sales, marketing, HR. So this won't be focused on policy making. There are resources on that. This won't be focused on your personal lives. This will only be focused on business. And you will be one of the first people to see the wireframes of the website. And so this is what the homepage will look like. This is what the subsection on the reports and guides will look like. And there will also be, we hope, the biggest database out there of applications of behavioral economics, so that you can search through it by area, by industry, by topic, and get as much inspiration as possible. So we're launching this in May, and all the content will be created by the biggest names out there, including Sam. And Sam has been a big supporter of this whole idea from when I told you for the first time. I think it was half a year ago, and from the get-go you were like, yes, I love it. And we managed to convince some investors to fund the idea, and so we're launching in May, and hopefully we'll be able to bring you, all the amazing work by Ogilvy, by Sam, Rory, and other consultants and other companies out there, so you can learn and gain inspiration. And now, again, my colleagues will post a link to InsideBe, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Please follow us there, as we will be posting more updates, posting the names and companies who are on board to share their insights on InsideBe. And yeah, so be there when this is launched, be there all the way until the launch and further. And now I will stop talking, and I will now leave the floor to Sam. Sam, very much looking forward to your presentation.
Thanks, Matej, and I've just seen in the chat, really appreciate everyone's time, particularly in India. It's getting late, so thank you for bearing with us as we kick off. So, Matej, I can't see you now, so can you see me perfectly?
Yes, all is good. I just hide myself, so not to be there and not to distract people from your face and your presentation.
Fantastic, thank you, and as I said, thrilled to be able to share some thinking, some ideas today, and really wanted to focus on is around innovation, how we can actually out-innovate our competitors with behavioural science. And oftentimes when we think of innovation, we can think that we need to revolutionise something. We think we have big ideas, these grandiose shifts of behaviour, viral campaigns are what we're after. We feel that we need a revolution. If we're faced with a big problem, right, we feel that we must need a big idea. A big problem deserves a big idea. A novel problem needs a novel idea. Right? If it's something I've never seen before, then chances are I also need an idea that I've not seen before by which to solve it. And psychologists call this a problem of proportionality or proportionality bias. We have a sort of innate equation that a big noise requires a big bang of force, right? It sort of makes sense in the physical world often, but it doesn't always make sense in the medical world or the psychological world. I was watching my young daughter a couple of months ago, and she picked up we're on the veranda, and she picked up a watering can, and she had a full watering can, and there were two pots, and one small pot and one big pot. And she went and she just tipped a little bit of water in the small pot, and then she emptied the whole water can on the big pot. Right? So even as a 2-year-old, she had this sense of size. The small one only needs a little bit of water. The big one needs a lot of water. Right? It's why we sort of question, how can a mosquito cause something like yellow fever, something so small, to create something with such devastation? There was a 1960s study that found actually observing crabs players rolling the dice to hit particular numbers. They found that people playing crabs, if you needed to score a high number, they found that people were more likely to roll the dice hard. If you needed a small number, people rolled the dice softer. Right? We have this intuitive connection between scale of problem, which can drive us for the scale of idea. And my sort of contention is it doesn't need to be this. It doesn't need to be this way. And the solution might already be there. And for us to help us find that conclusion, I want to sort of step to the side at the moment from psychology to talk about trains, and not any old train, but a train that was inspired by the kingfisher, the owl, and the Adelie penguin. Some of us may have heard of this. It's the Shinkansen 500. And the Shinkansen line it stretches from Tokyo to Osaka. So it's over a 500 kilometer stretch of rail. And when sort of challenged to reduce the time by which the Shinkansen 500 met this stretch, they weren't necessarily faced with a problem of speed. The train itself could drive this fast. What they faced was a challenge of noise. The noise restrictions in Japan at the time were below the sound of the train as it tried to speed this fast. So they needed a solution, and the head of engineering at the time on the project, Ijai Nakatsu, fortunately was a bird watcher, and this is an important point as we start to deconstruct some of the challenges of noise. One of the elements creating most noise on the Shinkansen 500 is what's called a pantograph. So it sits on the top of the train and it connects you to the wires, and with the turbulence, the rushing air, this was making a loud noise. It creates these turbulences of air and these turbulences of sound. So what they did is they redesigned the pantograph, and they designed it Firstly, inspired by the owl. And the owl is a nocturnal predator. It sort of swoops silently to stun its prey at night, and it can do this silently because on its feathers it has something called micro serrations. So small little serrations on its feathers, and they can help to create micro turbulences to cut down the vortexes. So by adding micro serrations on the pentagraph, they're able to dissipate the turbulences and reduce the sound. The second key bird on the pentagraph is the Adelie penguin. The Adelie penguin, shaped like a spindle, we normally sort of see it darting around the Atlantic, but evolved perfectly to have this streamlined shape. So actually creating the base designed by the Adelie to help remove the friction that it caused. But the pentagraph was just one of the problems with sound. The second problem was around really sort of a sonic boom. A sonic boom as the train left many of the tunnels along the Shinkansen, a bit like a gun firing a bullet. It created a sonic boom based on all this pressure. So again, Ijai Nakatsu, inspired by nature, inspired by the world around him, turned to a perfectly evolved kingfisher. A kingfisher that plunges into a substance 800 times denser than air to skewer its prey. It's a perfectly evolved beak to slice through the air and remove the turbulences causing the boom. And this is Ijai, and this is the Shinkansen 500. After some of these innovations and developments from evolution and biology, they were able to create a train that was not just 10% faster, but produced 15% less energy. Not by creating anything new, right? By looking at what existed and adapting it to their problem. So why do I start a story about behavioral science and psychology with a train? And I use this as a bridge into a really fascinating discipline called biomimicry. And the thinking behind biomimicry, a discipline that looks to borrow from nature to steer design and architecture. The assumption is that if it's around today, it survived 3.8 billion years of research and development. Right? If it's still here, there must be something we can learn from. You can see maybe in the middle of this image here, a fantastic innovative business in the US called Whale Power. I found that sort of the tubercles of a whale's fin minimizes the drag and maximizes lift. So actually by putting these on big sort of wind turbines, you can reduce friction and generate energy. So we can learn from biology, the best that survived in biology, and apply it to today. And this is important for us because behavioral science also isn't new when we're talking about the world of psychology and behavioral science. Restaurateurs for decades have filled their restaurants from the front windows back to normalize patronage, to make it feel like a popular restaurant. If you've ever had a recommended retail price with a big red line through it, you've tapped into an anchoring heuristic. Right? Closing down sales are a perfect example of a scarcity driver. Even the propensity of shopkeepers to put price tags on the bottom of items, so a sort of nudge to pick them up in store to see the price, commits us to the purchase. Once we have it in our hand, we have an increased sense of sort of ownership and endowment. So behavioral science is anew, or the application of behavioral science is anew, and actually we've been adapting to find these solutions, either advertently but largely unconsciously for many years. And we can begin to see patterns of solutions that businesses, individuals, brands have converged upon based on shared constraints. So if we're to look back into the world of biology, this is a concept known as convergent evolution. So both the dolphin and the shark have evolved with a very similar shape, but importantly with a dorsal fin. So this has occurred to help them to swim after their prey, survive in the ocean. But it's important to know that the dolphin is a mammal and the shark is a fish. Two different species have converged on the same solution based on shared constraints in the world around us. So if we look at this on the left-hand side, an image of a suite of remote controls. On the right-hand side, this is, I always hope that there's not too much information. A ticket of, I think it was an American Airlines ticket I had a couple of years ago. But what we can see in the next slide, actually, we can start to see how convergent evolution is occurring across categories when faced with the same challenge of complexity. On the left-hand side, sort of a reductionist process, a hack at home. On the right-hand side, it's Qatar Airways embracing this as a part of their service. How do we remove complexity? Or we're finding solutions in similar ways that we can begin to learn from each other. So rather than thinking about revolution when we're looking to solve problems, let's start to think more about evolution. What's already out there to help us to solve this, and how can we adapt with that, and how can we apply that within our work? And for the Shinkansen 500 to connect the Kingfisher with the train itself, we did that through the language of physics. Right? They still needed wind tunnels, they still needed the understanding lift and drag. That helped us to connect the dots between the natural world and the physical world, or the man-made world. For us, I think that connective device is behavioral science, and sometimes more importantly, the codification of behavioral science. The work of government and academia over many years to begin to sort of codify these patterns of behavior. And there's rich and robust discussion around how helpful this might be, that we might be oversimplifying human behavior by identifying these biases and heuristics, these patterns of observations. But again, it can be a really helpful starting point when looking to solve problems. I use the analogy that, I mean, language is really important. Language is supremely important. What we say we can see, and what we see we can apply. Right? If we have a language for something, we can identify it. Lots of really fascinating studies on color identity or identification. In English, for example, we have one color for blue. We have light blue and dark blue, but it's still under the central concept of blue. In Russian, for example, and I'm sure I'll mix this up, but in light blue instead, it's a totally different category. It's Sinoil or Gobel. So two different categories of what we would see as in English as blue, light blue or dark blue. But what this means under a scanner, under a choice task, Russians are faster at detecting these differences because they have two categorically different ways in which they map to their brain. Right? They're two different concepts. So if we were to think of behavior change like making a fruit salad, for example, and you might say, let's add a bit of the long, bent, yellow, slippery one, right? These are ways, or you can just say, let's try the banana. This is a little bit, let's throw in the banana. So we can start to get closer to throwing potential solution spaces quickly, and the codification of science helps us. And I want to step now, and this is something that we embrace at Ogilvy, and Matej, we spoke before about our team. This is our team. This is a couple of years ago now. We've got a socially distanced version on the way, and we're looking forward to getting back to the office soon. A team of psychologists, as I mentioned, behavioral economists that really seek to bring the world of behavioral science to business and communications and behavior change more generally. And across our work, and great thrill to see in the chat the appetite for practical applications, and we'll talk in a bit of depth in two of them this afternoon, and if there's time for more questions, then absolutely happy to explore further. But really, this is about the translation of this thinking into solutions that create outcomes. So tapping into the psychology of baby schema, for example, we found that painting babies' faces on shop fronts was a really effective way of reducing crime in Greenwich. We have a natural sort of oxytocin response when we see the round eyes and round face of a baby. We found actually by painting these shutters with babies' faces, we had an 18% reduction in crime. In partnership with Oxford University, that's looking to be more like 20%, and we're continuing to roll that out further. Again, asking a slightly different question based on our evolved response to the face of a baby, rather than spending more money and having police or increasing fines. We can tap into our evolved response. Creating salient feedback to increase hand hygiene behavior. This is a piece of work that we did in a huge food processing plant in South America. And one of the challenges with cleaning your hands is that you don't get a salient feedback loop. It's very hard to see the microbacteria disappearing as you clean. Right? So what we did was we created a hand stamp, a simple hand stamp made from a sticky organic ink that as you went through the food processing plant, you needed to actually clean that off. We addressed the salient feedback problem to help clean people's hands better. And we've faced a similar challenge in the Middle East and North Africa, working with the likes of Nestle to help encourage children and kids to drink more water. How can we encourage children to drink more water to better hydrate? Really important for health and obesity. But one of the challenges with this is that it's very hard to encourage a child to drink water when you've got a fizzy drink next door, right? How can you get that sense of feedback loop? So what we did was create a little app called Tummy Fish. And the kids could hold it on their stomach, and when the camera went dark, it sort of activated the tummy fish, and you could see this fish swimming in your stomach. And every time you had a glass of water, the fish grew bigger, the water was cleaner, unlocked treasures. If you reported to have a soft drink, it went a little bit cloudy. The fish got a little bit smaller. So you created a feedback loop to help encourage behavior. So similar area of psychology deployed of visual salient feedback and emotive feedback, I think it's fair, from hand hygiene to hydration. And finally, just working on priming contacts in call centers. And this is a small piece, well, I say it's a small piece, I think it's a very important piece of work we did with Adobe in Delhi. We were working on their inbound call center. And we found that when we spent some time on the calls, lots of people, it's an inbound call center, people are calling to cancel their subscription. And we found that actually the most common response of many of the contact center agents was to ask, why are you calling to cancel? And it sort of makes sense when you ask, why are you calling to cancel? Because it helps us to sort of triage the call. We can understand what's wrong with the product so we can fix it. But what it also does is it primes us to cancel, right? It sort of commits us to this action. If we verbalize, I'm calling to cancel because of this, then we're more likely to follow through with it. So what we did is simply change some of the opening statements. It's rather than asking, why are you calling to cancel, we asked, why did you join with Adobe in the first place? We found that unlocked, reduced the decline in subscriptions. So a couple of cases, some of which we've shared before. I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about these two cases, specifically through the lens of evolved solutions or evolutionary ideas, is how I call them. So the first is the bottom one, is actually looking at how we prevent injuries in factories. As I mentioned before when Matej and I were speaking, we're very fortunate within Ogilvy to explore sort of the weird and wonderful spaces that a classic advertising agency may not be invited to. So this is working in big factories in North America to see how we can help workers to better understand how their brains work, but also develop policies, processes, and tools to help them come home safely. And one of the things about certainly the work that we experience, but I think the work that many factories experience, is that it's quite high repetition, high familiarity work. Long shifts, quite highly repetitive tasks. People become quite familiar with their role. But what we see is actually the more familiar we are, sometimes the more risks that we take. I think the famous statistic is 1/3 of car accidents occur a mile from your home. Right? You start to feel safe, you put yourself at risk. But what we can see in the natural world around us, some stimulus that actually begins to reduce our risk-taking behaviors. Right? This is known as the avenue effect. I imagine many of us can appreciate, maybe not a tree-lined street just like this, but imagine if we're the difference between driving on a big freeway versus driving the same speed down a tight road. Right? The context of the information moving fast past you makes you feel like you're driving a bit too fast. So you naturally slow down. So in Nudge, Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein speak about Lakeshore Drive, a long stretch in Chicago with a sharp bend. People were taking it too fast. They found just by painting white lines on the road, as you can just see now, painting white lines on the road and make them come closer and closer together, we gave people the perception that they were driving too fast, so they naturally slowed down. A solution that was more effective than increasing the fines or lowering the speed limit. In the Rio Olympics, right, we're talking health and safety. In the Rio Olympics, the first Olympics to ever ban men from wearing headgear in boxing. And what they found actually is that men are more likely to put themselves in danger, or boxers, I shouldn't say men. Boxers are more likely to put themselves in danger because they have a false sense of security. They strap on their armor and they go and put their heads in spaces that they shouldn't do. So actually it's safer. It's safer if we remove these guards, right? Because they psychologically set us up for risk. Right? It's like wearing a seatbelt. You feel a little bit more invincible than if you're driving without it. Right? So if we go back now to our workers, right? If we're thinking of all the appropriate
personal protective equipment, our hard hats, our helmets, our gloves? Are we actually psychologically setting these individuals up for failure? So what we did was develop a concept around vulnerable personal protective equipment. So again, borrowing from this lineage of an avenue effect, learning from our Rio Olympics and our boxers, we needed to make people feel more vulnerable, by which to encourage safer behavior, just to remind people of their vulnerability in spaces where they otherwise may not. So these are just some early scamps of some prototypes of some gloves. We ended up producing a series of gloves and trialing in the factories to make sure that there weren't sort of icebergs out there that we didn't identify. But one of the nice things, well, the fortunate things around testing interventions in safety environments is that the good thing is that if we're doing our jobs well, that injuries don't occur often. So we have a low base rate of things to measure success of interventions. So we needed to test the effectiveness of this campaign or this idea through a survey design. So what we did was we tested 3 different conditions. So if you signed up for the survey, you got one of 3 conditions, either a bare hand condition, a skeleton glove condition, or just a normal glove condition. And what we asked is people to rate their perceived vulnerability of injury under certain conditions. So the first was using like a box cutter, where we asked people to think if what's the likelihood of someone occurring a serious injury at this stage. And we also assessed the same sort of prompt with a drop saw or with a handsaw, so different sort of severity of injury. And this was to help us to assess vulnerability. Are people feeling more vulnerable under different conditions? What was really important for us also is to look at risk propensity. So to measure this, what we did is create a series of videos with the same sound overlaid that had an image of someone hammering a nail and asking if it was a gloved hand or a bare hand or a skeleton hand, whether you'd feel comfortable having that sped up or down. And what we did find is we had a positive correlation between increased vulnerability and lowered risk taking, which is great because that's what we're seeking to justify the science. But what we found as we looked across conditions for circular saw, we found no difference across the conditions. And this is one of those that kind of makes sense on retrospect. We weren't probably expecting it, but it sort of makes sense on retrospect. If I've got a glove on or not a glove on with a circular saw, it's not making a difference. What we found with a handsaw, we had a 20% increase in perceived vulnerability on a handsaw at a medical grade 99% confidence interval for our bare hand. So we had an effect that actually being gloved or not gloved boosted vulnerability between subjects. And critically for us, when we looked at the small scale injury, I suppose, the box cutter, we found a significant boost in perceived vulnerability. Again, knowing that vulnerability is positively correlated with a reduction in risk-taking. So something quite small, adding a lick of paint to a pair of gloves, dipping the fingers to remind us of fingernails, for example, can start to actually psychologically reinforce the power of these tools. Something quite simple, learning from what's already around us, can change behavior. And the last case I wanted to share is really around how we reduce organizational debt. And this is a particular piece of work I'm looking at for a local council, looking at social care repayments and seeing how we can help people to pay for their social care repayments on time. So how can we more explicitly begin to nudge people to direct debit? We know, again, the amazing psychology of defaults. If we can get someone to sign up for a direct debit of their payment, that's a far more consistent method than if we were to have someone send us a check every time. And a couple of barriers that we needed to address. Like this information for many is hard to process. There can be information overload. It's sort of not clear how to make the payments. There can sometimes be a lack of perceived consequences. This is one of those things that the people in the TV license mailroom have got down pat. Like they make you feel terrified if you've not paid your TV license. They do a great job of perceived consequences. But these are some of the challenges that we're faced. So how can we start to sort of ease the process of information with chunking, increase the sort of the perception of the service by sort of talking through how the money was being spent, and boost some of the perceived consequences just with some powerful language. But the piece I wanted to spend a little bit more on is one key element of one condition. using a piece of psychology that some of us may be familiar with, but we might not always know the term. It's called the asymmetric decoy. Dan Ariely writes of this and his experience with The Economist, whereby adding a product of lesser value but equal price can disproportionately sway behavior to a more expensive item, for example. So here, the choice decision, and I forget the percentages, but the choice decision initially for the Economist subscription in online access at $59, compared with the print and web subscription at $125, a vast population of people chose just the online subscription at $59. When we added an asymmetric decoy, having just the print submission at $125, then a significant proportion of individuals were comfortable spending more, because we view the world relatively, not absolutely. Now there's a frame of reference, and print and web subscription for $125 is far better than just print subscription for $125. But we see this, it's quite complex, but we see this around us all the time too. There are evolved adaptations. That water in the middle looks far more delicious than the boring water on the right? If we're trying to encourage people to change their behavior when it comes to soft drinks on occasion, maybe actually making an asymmetric decoy of a negative looking water compared to a really refreshing water, that could work. This did a bit of a circulation early this week. I think Mike Fox found this, a smaller bottle of oil in Sainsbury's for £3.50 and a much bigger bottle for £3. By creating the decoy, we help to make the decision a far easier one. So what did we do then for Worcester Council? So we created an effort index. So to help build some categories, some sense of navigation, we simply told people that direct debits was the easiest. Right? On the effort index, direct debit was the easiest. There's a very low difficulty rating. It takes less than 5 minutes compared to paying by check every month. Wow, that's a tough ask. Right, so we created a way by which people could navigate their decisions, framed as an asymmetric decoy. And this helped us to generate a 61% increase in direct debit signups through this condition. So just changing the format, the architecture of the information can be really effective. So hopefully we can start to see some borrowed solutions, some patterns in behavior, and we can begin to deploy across categories, from road transportation to boxing safety through to worker safety, from Economist subscriptions through to olive oil through to direct debit signups. These are some universal ways by which we can understand and identify shared problems, and creatively it really opens us up to far more solutions than we might have imagined. And if we can start to see some of the language that we often use in business, we talk about loyalty. Right? Loyalty is a really powerful concept, but we can start to sort of decouple, get more granular maybe as to what might lead to loyalty as an outcome. How might we learn from commitment or sunk cost? If we look at, again, an evolution, the behavior of many female birds to require a male to build a nest is a lovely sort of evolved sunk cost solution to make sure once sort of procreation has occurred, he doesn't fly the coop, he's invested in the nest. Right? These are some strategies that have evolved that we can better understand and deploy them for these outcomes. We see the same of trust. How might we tap into some of the elements of trust, authority, messenger, signaling? A lovely element of trust, even if we look at M&Ms. If I forget the name of it, I think it was Van Halen, had a script writer for every concert they ever did. And buried in it, I think, was a no brown M&Ms clause. So once they got to the dressing room, and if they were ever to find M&Ms in their bowl, that forced them to question actually whether or not the tuning was correct. Right? It created a really salient marker, a really salient signal of trustworthiness through an M&M. And if we can understand how Van Halen orchestrated this for their concerts, we can begin to reinforce that in our business every day. Similarly, choice, and we've talked about this just now. So there are many ways, again, we can begin to demystify, or not demystify necessarily. I think it's also sort of embracing a degree of complexity, but offering solutions that we otherwise may have not brought to the table. And not just random solutions, but hypotheses that we can prove and disprove. I think it's clear, and hopefully it's clear, that behavioral science isn't a silver bullet. Right? but it can be a really helpful starting point. And by thinking about our challenges through these lenses and an assumption that actually the solution might be there, it may already have evolved, can start to change our innovation. So that's kind of what I wanted to cover, that really behavioral science isn't new. And there's a rich source of inspiration in the world around us that we can begin to adapt and deploy to find powerful solutions. So we're not attracted with the proportionality bias of it must be new. Actually, the old can be made new quite successfully. We can out-innovate via evolution and not revolution. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sam. It's always for me so mind-blowing listening to you talking about your case studies, because I think you and your team, for me at least, by far the most creative BE consultancy out there. I really admire how you're able to link real business challenges with solutions and creativity. Because this is what I truly believe is the way forward, is the way how to really come up with solutions which will work by combining the insights with creativity. And this is my first question. So how do you go about the creative process? How do you manage to come up with these creative solutions? Because someone might be looking at the same principles that you end up using in one of your projects, but the actual solution that this person or this company would design would be so far from the level of creativity that you bring in.
Really good question. So for me, it's all about the nature of the classic psychologist question is it's not about developing the solutions, it's about developing better questions. So actually what we find, and for me, I think the questions are enriched through evolved adaptations, right? So we can ask finer questions of our challenges. So really our creative process is around, most critically, the diagnosis. What's the behavior that we're looking to change? What do we think is preventing that from occurring? What are the barriers, drivers, motivators we can tap into? How might we begin to think about that within a shared universe? Right? If we're looking at an accounting firm picking up a new piece of software, maybe there's something actually we can learn from doctors in e-records that's been solved. Like there's parallel universes that we connect by shared challenges, and really working to then craft many different questions that can help to generate solutions. And my sort of training after psychology was in advertising strategy, and in advertising strategy, a critical element of at least traditional brief writing process is around having a proposition. You do all this work, it's a bit like an hourglass. You do all this work, and it goes down to one proposition. That's the 3 words, the sentence that the creative teams will work on for a while. And what we find in our practice is sometimes by asking many questions, by using the theory to generate richer questions, we can begin to surround ourselves with solutions and take us into spaces that we wouldn't have thought naturally. And psychology and behavioral science gives us permission to ask questions that otherwise we might have been walked out of the room. Right? If I'm to speak with the head of occupational health and safety and walk into the office and say, what we need to do is make your workers feel at risk, right? I'd be marked straight out. But if we can come and say, well, this is the theory about risk compensation, and while we're not going to put our individuals at any more harm by removing gear, we can actually maybe work psychologically to increase the sense of vulnerability and trial it. That's a far better way to help us to navigate an innovative discussion, I think.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying basically is that at the core of your innovative approach are questions, are the right questions that you ask yourselves, and by answering those questions, you're able to brainstorm very creative solutions that otherwise you might not be able to come up with.
Absolutely. And there's a bit of an anecdote that sort of helped. One of the critical moments, I think, in my career as in applied behavioral science was actually having lunch with my partner and her family back in Sydney. And we were talking about the time actually her cousin was pregnant with her second baby.
She knew the sex of the baby, her husband knew the sex of the baby, and their young daughter knew the sex of the baby, and no one else in the family knew. And as you expect, then okay, so everyone harassed the poor girl for months. Like, give it up. If you know the gender of the baby, please give it up. And amazingly, she kept tight-lipped. Like, we might think of this sort of as a system 1, system 2 control. Like, her system 1 was working overtime to not reveal, and that was until someone asked a slightly different question. Rather than asking is it a boy or a girl? What's the gender of the baby? Someone asked, what's the name of the baby going to be? And she said, Sophia. And when I heard that story, I thought, well, that's the business we're in, right? Because there are many ways of thinking about driving an action, right? And you can ask the same old question, same old problem, or you can have permission to step to the side. You can step to the side and think, well, what's a lateral way into this? It's still justified, and sometimes the solution's better. And Rory, our founder, who's a big influence on me, uses the language of expanding our solution space. Right? We can open up a new world by which this can lie, and that's what I think powerful questions can do. And psychology helps us to get there, and evolved solutions in the world around us help us to dimensionalize those questions, so we have more creative answers. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm getting a bit better.
Brilliant. I love this. And you just reminded me of a story of a colleague, well, not a colleague, but of someone I know. They have a young boy, a young son, and the problem they were facing was that he was refusing to wear any t-shirts where there was no picture on the t-shirt, and they couldn't figure out why is it. And they try to ask all kind of questions, persuade the little boy, motivate the little boy to wear something else besides the t-shirts with a picture, which he only had a few of.
Yeah.
And they were not successful until they realized that the reason why he was only willing to wear t-shirts with a picture was that when he went to kindergarten, at noon, they had to go to bed, and he had to take off the t-shirt. And then when he was taking it on again, he didn't know where was the front and where was the back, and the picture was helping him. Yes. So the solution wasn't, motivation. It's a brilliant example of how a problem can be a lack of skill.
Yes.
And what I very often find with our clients is that they only look at convincing clients through the lens of increasing motivation. And what you were saying, what you were talking about throughout the presentation, is that very often the solutions are hidden elsewhere. It's not in a lack of motivation. It can be in a lack of skill, in a lack of opportunity, in a lack of salience, for example.
Yeah, and a lack of motivation in a way that we might not have explored. So we can think of that sort of motivation, belief, sort of attitudes, more conscious, but actually you might say sort of motivation of self-preservation was at play in the gloves, but we could access it slightly differently. So I think you're right, and similarly, and there's a question in the chat I think Anna's just asked, just around sort of frameworks that we find quite helpful, and there are many different frameworks. So COM-B, for example, I think is a really powerful tool for the right sorts of challenges. And so COM-B for those who aren't aware, we find it to be a really helpful first stage diagnostic process. To ask sort of the capability, opportunity, motivation of an individual to enact a behavior, and oftentimes we might fall into thinking that it's motivation, but it's not. So again, and when we think of going back to questions, this is where checklists can be helpful. So having checklists to help us sort of get to the bottom of a challenge could be really helpful, just in diagnostic and solutions.
Right. Well, we have a couple more questions here. Before we jump to the questions, I just one thing I want to tell you guys. Some of you might know, some of you might not. a bit more than 1.5 years ago, together with Sam, Rory Sutherland, and one other big name from the BE field, we created a masterclass on how to use all these insights that Sam was talking about, that I was talking about in the previous webinars, and that you can see in Rory's keynotes, how to use all that in marketing. So if you want to check that out, just go to mindworksacademy.com, and here is a code that you can use to get a discount. There is a 50% off because it's COVID and we want to make it available and affordable for as many people as possible. And now you can save a little bit more with the someone watching this webinar. But back to the question, Sam. So the one which got the most votes was this one. What are the biggest challenges in delivering projects entirely online? How is client acquisition going online?
I mean, I think it's actually been a really help. I mean, we'd all rather be with each other. That's for sure. But we're finding, as a knowledge-based business, we're able to speak with more people than we would have otherwise. There's less downtime as we're all experiencing in commuting. But certainly, if we were to run a workshop, sometimes, I mean, 2019, if we think of some of the locations where we were lucky to work, there's a lot of time sitting on planes. And so for us to be able to spend more time with the problem and less time traveling, I think is a good thing. And great new digital tools where actually you can have workshops sort of ready to go. We can create sort of environments by which we can pivot based on the direction of a challenger or a client. So I'm actually finding it hard to see us going back to pure physical ideation, and really looking forward to sort of a hybrid future. Our team, I was just on the WhatsApp thread today. I'm just starting to sort of plug in iPads so we can sync on drawing things together so actually there are really sort of opportunities that wouldn't have been there if we weren't forced digitally, that I think is changing our practice absolutely.
And I think that this whole pandemic has been a huge catalyst for the digital transformation. It had been going on before as well, rather fast. But what happened in March last year when COVID hit Europe, I think we switched to a whole different gear when it comes to digital transformation and to the way that teams work. And what was quite surprising was to see the huge corporations, bank, insurance companies, telcos adopting to the new situation quite fast and trying to see the benefits in it. And I've had many clients saying that they've actually become so much more effective as a team because they don't waste time on commuting, on sitting in useless meetings, and there's so much more time to actually get things done.
Yeah. I think efficiency is increased. It's an amazing. It is a different experience, and I know we're moving into just what we're all experiencing, right? But like just the amount of the volume of information and contact that we're sort of getting through a small screen is fairly intense. But it's I think it's really certainly helping us to connect. And as I said, as a practice, we're doing more work across the Atlantic, across Greater Europe, and plugging in with our teams in Australia than we've ever done before. And I think this is really helping that for us. As I said, Zoomlandia is going strong.
There's another question here, Sam. Since behavioral science is in the business sector is a very recent trend, how do these new practices differ from the standard marketing ones?
It's a good question, and you might argue that nothing does, or you can argue that there are similarities and then there are extensions. As I mentioned, having a offer ends in or until sold out or closing. I mean, these are all tactics in marketing that we've been doing for years. We just might not have known why we can do them.
sorry, why they're effective. And for us, it's then particularly when we talk about sort of the creative manifestation of these insights, is once we understand the human driver behind it, and we can work to generate a more novel creative solution. So actually we can find other ways to dramatize the sense of scarcity if that's deemed to be an effective strategy for this problem or category. So we can sort of extend that. So I don't think it's like replacing. I think it can help us better understand what we've intuitively known for a long time, and hopefully open new horizons in spaces that we've not considered or we weren't comfortable considering because it didn't make logical sense. But sometimes it doesn't need to be. And again, we're sort of blessed with our founder, Rory, who sort of coined the sort of the phrase, if your solution was logical, we'd already have found it by now, right? So the rational solutions have been solved. We need to step to the side. And this is helping to give us confidence and a justification to do that.
I like what Rory says, that very often what a marketer and a behavioral expert will end up at can be the same thing, with the exception that it might take 3 weeks for the BE expert and it might take 30 years for the marketer. Because what behavioral economics allows us to do is to try very specific things and not to only do trial and error. Because marketing has discovered a lot of approaches which work, but as you said at the beginning, it's not codified, it doesn't have a name, and we cannot describe it in precise language. And I think this is crucial. What behavioral economics does is that it gives us very specific and concrete tools to play with, to work with, and to design solutions where the chance that they will work is so much higher than if we simply, do some trial and error.
That's right, and I think the way you described it, as I said, it's not a silver bullet. We test things that we believe in that go backwards. But the benefit of that is at least we hopefully have a better understanding of what we were testing, so we don't test it again. But by creating a language to help us, again, it goes back to I saw some interesting chat around sort of the 17 different types, sort of words for snow, right? Once we have a language, we navigate the world by language. And once we have this language, we can see opportunities more easily. We can connect ideas that we otherwise wouldn't, right? And as marketers or as innovators, that's kind of what we want to do. Very, very few things are completely novel. The sort of life's a remix. How can we find the pieces that should come together or we should learn from more efficiently? And that's really what we embrace.
Another question, what's the most common team problem issue you encounter with your clients as you consult with them?
What's our most common issue consulting with? Team issue or?
Well, probably what is the topic or the assignments that your clients approach you with the most often?
Gotcha. We're fortunate with a spectrum. We're doing a lot of work in health and sustainability, a lot of work out of our team. So Chris Graves is fantastic. If you've not come across Chris Graves, runs the Center for Behavioral Science in New York, does a lot of work with sort of vaccine and hesitancy. We're doing a lot of work in cognitive segmentation, so understanding the hidden who behind our audiences to sort of see how we can enrich personas. So a lot of work there. We're doing some work in subscription at the moment. Again, it feels like a really lovely space by which we can help to deploy some simple mechanics and some longer term ideas for clients. A lot of work historically in communications and brand building, adding a fresh lens here. We tend to sort of bucket a lot of our work into sort of insight solutions and training. So insights to help us better diagnose the real why of the problem, solutions that could manifest themselves as communications or experiences or interventions. And this is the piece that I thought you were asking, actually, Matej. Like we often don't know. It's good that we don't know what we're going to produce. We didn't walk into a factory in Connecticut and think we're going to produce a pair of gloves, right? So we let the opportunity, the insight guide us, and then we try to find how we make it work. So, but within sort of communication interventions and experiences, that tends to map. And also a lot of work in training, as you've identified that people are really interested in this space. So run great sessions with big global organizations and foundations to help their departments to better understand how our brains are wired, how we can better understand the hidden who of our audience and craft really powerful narratives. So that's sort of most of the sorts of challenges that we're brought in for.
Thank you, Sam. I think we will slowly approaching the end. So I want to thank you so much for being here, for sharing all these amazing insights, and hopefully we'll see you here again soon. Everybody, please, once again, follow Sam on Twitter, on LinkedIn. My colleagues will repost the links to Sam's social media. And if you feel like connecting with Sam, either do it through social media or you can do it through us. We'll pass on the message, definitely. So Sam, thanks a lot once again. The best of luck with the projects that you're currently working on, and hopefully talk to you very, very soon.
Thank you, likewise. And can I do you mind? I would love to do a small shout out. I've seen my cousin Emma on the line, which is
absolutely.
Isn't this so? Hi Emma, we must catch up. But thank you for having me. It's really lovely to share these ideas and always a pleasure. Always a pleasure to speak with you and to look forward to doing it again soon. Thanks, team.
Perfect. And thank you everybody for watching us, and hopefully we'll see you here soon again next month, because we'll be talking with another great behavioral expert from Switzerland this time, and but this still is to be announced. So thank you, have a good night or have a good day if you're listening and watching from the US, and Sam, once again, thanks a lot.